finalized the shidduch, that's when the parents of the boy met the girl, and vice versa. So the parents of the boy get there, and they speak, and they talk about the finances, and then the Rosh Hashiva comes. Rav Hutter comes, and when he comes, he goes into a private room and he consults with the parents of his Talmud, and he comes out of the room and he goes over to the father of the Kala, and this is like in the 50s, and he says, this is one of my top bochum. I expect that you're going to be giving him like $1,000 a month for the next 10 years. So after the father of the Kala recovered from his collapse of that statement, he says, Rosh Hashiva, don't worry, we've already worked it out between the two families, everything's in order. So the Rosh Hashiva said, that's fine, that's between you and the parents of the boy, but you still have to deal with the Rosh Hashiva of the boy. And the Rosh Hashiva of the boy says, this is what it has to be. So the father of the Kala was like, frankly, it's good, we're good. He says, no. So he told Rosh Hashiva, what you're asking for is an extremely large amount of money. It's impossible. There's no way I can do that. So the Rosh Hashiva said, well, then I can't let you take my Talmud. And like they were appalled at the audacity of the Rosh Hashiva. He says, well, I'm sorry. And they get up and they leave, and he walks out. And they're Mavasa Akala. Can you imagine such a story? 30 years later, maybe 40 years later, after they were both, this boy and this girl were both married to their own husbands and wives, they both built families, and both of their parents, both sets of parents were no longer on this world. The Chassan said, let me tell you what happened. It was less than 10 years since World War II. My mother walked in, and when she saw this girl's mother, she recognized her as the Kappa woman who used to beat her mercilessly every day in the concentration camp. And she said, how could I be mishatel with such a person? But how could I humiliate a Kala and walk away and say, this is who your mother is? So when the Rosh Hashiva came, we shared with him this dilemma, and he said, don't worry, I'll take care of it. So he made himself look greedy and disgusting. Why? To protect this family, that no one should find out who they were. So when you hear a story at first, before you hear the punchline, you think like, whoa, that's a nice story. I'm saving that for a perfect occasion. That's like an off-the-chart story.
Okay. It's a good one for Shavuot. It's a good Shavuot bracha story.
Yeah,
I never liked.
And that's not this family. And that's not this family.
but somebody married into that family, right? So maybe somebody should have been warned.
I guess Rav Hutner felt that we can't judge people in that situation, so we won't publicize it. But I don't know. It's sad on any angle. It's a tragedy. So it's very hard. Okay, so what did we learn yesterday? I think we learned yesterday how Rabbi Akiva became wealthy, and we then learned about this egg that had the ability to be like a biopsy, and that when it went through someone's intestines and it came out at the end, it seems like it wasn't easy to digest. It would take with it a sample of any infection that was in the person's intestines. This way the doctor would be able to see what was going on and prescribe the correct medicine. I'm going to quickly run through something that we did learn yesterday, but it was at the end. So some people left early, so I'm going to run through it. Tanan Osam, there's a halacha that if you're working with food, you're allowed to eat from the food. It's like Sachsam Sharbadisha, you're allowed to eat from if you're working with grapes, you're allowed to eat those grapes. So it's not awesome. So if you ever go to a restaurant and the waiter starts picking off your food as he's delivering it to you, you'll know it's because he's working in it, so he's allowed to. That's right. So if he was working with a certain type of fig, that doesn't allow him to eat elsewhere, which is a different type of fig. Machlufsen, it's a minute tetaini, it's a type of fig. The Ovdin Minoin Lapti. You use it to make this dish called Lapti. Who gaver the Yob Abdul Chavi Lagmur Alpha, Lagmure, Alpha Mini Lapti. He sent his Evet to culinary school to learn 1,000 different recipes of how to produce Lapti. Agmei Tamneme, he got ripped off because they only taught his Evet 800. Azim the Ladina, the Kamid Rebbe, he took him to the Torah, to Rebbe, to the school to the Torah. Amar Rebbe, you guys are unbelievable. Our father said, the people who went through the Churban, Nashinu Toiva. We forgot the greatness that we had in those days. We never even saw these things. And look at you guys, 800 types of recipes. So it doesn't say what the verdict was, but I believe I saw somewhere that Rebbe was passing against the school, but I'm not sure. And now we're up to a Gevaltic Gemara about Bat Chodim. And Rebbe clearly didn't like Bat Chodim. Rebbe Ovid Lehilula, Rebbe made a chasana, Reb Shimon Rebbe. And you can imagine what a chasana was. I don't know if this is a guzma or not, but we're talking $240 million. Kosav al-Beis Genana, he wrote on this. It's a question who wrote this, and there's two pshatim, but it was written on this hall, Esrin Ba'arba Alfin Ribuyin, 24,000 times 10,000. So that's $240 million dinarim. A dinar probably is even worth more than $1. So it was a very, very expensive budget. He could have built a condo building with that money.
Art school says 23 to 28 million dollars in today's money, based on the price of silver.
So that's still that's the wedding. Art scroll said in today's money, what edition of Art scroll that is? It can make a big difference.
It's the latest. I just bought it.
Post COVID, that would be more like 50 million. No, this was Chassakas. Oh, the hall? Okay. Nafku al Beis Genana were spent for this hall. And he didn't invite Bar Kapara. So that's one pshat how to read it. The other pshat how to read it is the Rebbe made this lavish chasana, and Kosav Bar Kapara, who was insulted that they didn't invite him, he wrote graffiti. Avada, it was graffiti that could be easily washed off. He wouldn't be a mazik. Bar Kapara wrote on the wedding hall, this big multi-million-dollar wedding the Rebbe made, and he didn't invite me. He actually wrote that. It was a subtle hint to Rebbe that he might have missed. So anybody who makes chassan, you know what it's like. If you forget to invite somebody you're supposed to invite. So Bar Kapara wanted to subtly hint to Rebbe that he missed him out, so he wrote big graffiti across the whole hall. You spent so much money on your chasna and you didn't invite me. You could hear he was a batchan already. So this is what happened. So Amar Lei, Bar Kapara said, if even people who don't keep the Torah could have such riches to make such a fancy wedding, you can imagine how much schar someone is going to have if they do the Ratzon Hashem. Azmnei, Rebbe got the subtle hint. He caught on, and he sent an invitation, and he didn't stop sending an invitation. He said, "Oh, the invitation that I sent you came back. You never ever tell a guy I didn't invite you. You say the invitation came back. Don't you live on 120 Bathurst Street, Maryland? No, I live 120 Bathurst Street, Toronto. Oh, by mistake, it was addressed wrong. Right? We all know how it goes. So then he invited him. Once he invited him, Sama Bar Kapar was not upset anymore. If this is what the Oyster Ritzaynoi have in the Olam Hazeh, can you imagine what they have in Olam Haba al Achas Kam over Kam? That's right. So if the first kash is how you talking that Bar Kapara would speak this way against Rebbe, so there are those who learn that the Mashal explains that this is not what he meant. But he's meant the riches that Rebbe has over here, even Rishoyim have. So even though the Rishoyim could match in Ruchnius what the Tzadikim have, will even have more. So it was never a disparaging comment against Rebbe. But then the shaila is why Taka didn't Rebbe invite Bar Kapara? He knew he would be insulted. You see, why didn't he invite him? Yeah. The other one was, yeah. No, you had the wrong address for Rabbi Stefanski, and they had the wrong address for Rabbi Stefanski. So what we're going to find over here, is Bar Kapara was a Bachan, and we're going to learn shortly that he was a Bachan. And Rebbe B'Shumei Neufin didn't want Bat Chonos. He didn't want Bat Chonos by his chasana. And there's the Meforshim speak about why Rebbe didn't want Bat Chonos. There's many different reasons, but one of the reasons is that we know Rebbe is called Rabbeinu HaKadosh. Kedusha is when someone is very separated from the various of the world, and he was afraid that it's Kalash Roish, it's Choik, that brings to Znus, that brings to Isurim. So Rebbe said, I have to keep myself on a higher Madrega. Sure, it's nice to have a Batkan, but not for me. I'm not allowed to even laugh. We're soon going to learn that when Rebbe laughed, it caused huge problems. Rebbe had to be very serious. Rebbe would probably not get my jokes, or he wouldn't allow me in the room. I'd be more honored if he didn't let me in the room. At least he thinks they're funny, right? But if he let me in the room and ignored me, that would be much worse. What? Could be. Okay, so that's the first thing. And Bar Kapara held that Adarabah, by making Rebbe laugh, his Torah that he would learn B'Simcha would have even a greater impact. So this was actually a big machlokes in what has to be. Now there's a Reb Kiva Eger here. There's a Reb Kiva Eger here, and I forgot to bring the Chumash. There's I actually need to Gemara Makos. Reb Kiva Eger says, I am Bazeh Dover Nechmod B'Tshuva Shvus Yaakov. No, I need it. It wasn't a Chumash, it was a Gemara Makos. So I'll have to remember it. I have to remember it. So, if I'm not mistaken, what the Shvus Yaakov, the Dover Nechmod, that the Shvus Yaakov says is as follows. All the way at the end of Makos, which people don't really learn because they only read it by the seam, so because of that, they don't delve into too much. It talks about the story how Rabbi Kiva was an optimist. And when the Rabbanim were coming towards, that's right, when they were coming towards Yerushalayim, there was a fox coming out of the Beis Kodesh HaKodeshim. They cried, and Rabbi Kiva laughed. And when Rabbi Kiva laughed, I asked him, what are you laughing about? This is tragic. So he said that since I know that the Nevuah came true, Lagabe de Shualim, leaving the Dreinzich on the Makam HaMikdash, I know that eventually the next Nevuah, which means that we're going to have a Geula, we'll rebuild the Beis HaMikdash, that'll also be clear. And then right after that, the Gemara says something else, that they saw a big legion of armies walking by, and once again they were sad. And Rabbi Kiva laughed because Rabbi Kiva said that I think that's how Maseches Makos ends. Oh, you have Makos. Well, how did the Gemara Makos end? Oh, but it's missing the inside. It's not Toichik Kabara. Oh, good. So I'm out of order. So the Shvus wants to say that that's what Bar Kapara is referred to, and that is there's actually a shaila. We know it says Ozyu Mola is Chok Pidach. You're not allowed to, only when Mashiach comes we'll be able to have full simcha. Now, at the time of the Beis Hamikdash, before the Churban, there you weren't allowed to have Mola Simcha. The only time you're allowed to have a complete Simcha was by a Sudas Mitzvah, like by a Chasna. That's when you were able to go all out and have Simcha. But, and this is brought down in the poskim. I don't remember the details, but what I do remember is that there's a shaila if you're allowed to have Mola Simcha or not. So the poskim sort out that when by a Chasna, by a Sudas Mitzvah, there you can have a complete Simcha, but even when the Beis Hamikdash was standing, Stamazo, you wouldn't allow a complete Simcha. Now that we have the Churban, now that we don't have the Beis Hamikdash, even by a Chasna, you can't have Moli Simcha, right? We have Simon of Avelis, we have to remember the Beis Hamikdash, and in Yerushalayim, you're not allowed to have a band, right? There's a lot of things we have to remember. So Rebbe held that they weren't allowed to have so much simcha. Bar Kapara said, he was referring back to what Rabbi Kiva said when he saw the legions of Roman soldiers. He said, so what he was trying to say is, don't feel bad that now we're in Golus, but eventually Mashiach is going to come and we are going to be in charge and we will be able to be Molis Chokpinu. And that's why Bar Kapara held that, and that was a machlokes Rebbe and Bar Kapara. Bar Kapara held that even now we should go with the Ganza Simcha, and therefore as a Batkan I belong at the wedding. And Rebbe held no, now is a time where we're not supposed to have complete Chokpinu, and therefore you shouldn't be at the wedding. So it was a whole lomdish machlokes between Bar Kapara and Rebbe whether or not a Batkan should be at the wedding. There was a story where a Batkan was very sick. He was on his deathbed. And as he was dying, he heard another very bad piece of news that a local caterer had just died. So he says, "Oh, the boy Shalom, they must be making a chasna up there, because that's how it works. First you call the caterer, and then you call the Batkan." Okay, so let's see the Heilige Gemara weiter. Yoima de Mechayich be Rebbe, a day that Rebbe would smile. I think Mechayich means to smile, not to laugh, right? Well, how does the article touch it? Laugh. Asya Paranusa Alma. Paranius would come to the world. And the Meforshim bring down that Rebbe lived in tsar his whole life. He lived in pain. He was not well. Rebbe lived in pain his whole life. So that it's this nusach that Bar Kapara was referring to over here. So it's brought down that Rebbe lived with tsar his whole life, and that pain was what brought a Yeshua to Klal Yisrael. But it wasn't the pain; it was the fact that he was makabel with bi'ahava. So we're going to see what happened over here, and the piece of information that I just shared is going to help understand this Gemara. Omer Leila Bar Kapara. So he told Bar Kapara, "Do me a favor, loy savdichon." Now we know where the word batchen comes from. Bedich is a joke. Loy savdichon. Timur hatoiver. Don't batchen near me. Stay away from me. V'yahivna loch arboin gurur chiti. I'll give you 40 measures of chitin, which was a lot. And supposedly, Bar Kapara made his parnasa out of batchen. So Rebbe was saying, if you don't batchen, I'll pay your salary. Omer lei. So Bar Kapara doubled down. Lech zeimar. The chol guruya the beina shakilma. I'm going to take whatever I need, which is a lot more than what you just want to give me. Shakal de kula rabba. He took a big basket, as if to show this is how much I need every day, which was a lot more than Rebbe suggested. Chav yakufra. He smeared it with tar to seal it, so that if you put small wheat kernels in it, they won't fall out through the small holes. And he put it on his head upside down like a helmet, and it covered his face. He dressed up. He dressed up and he walked into Rebbe. So Rebbe told him, "Don't batchen." The first thing he did in response was at batchen. And he came into Rebbe and he told Rebbe, "Lecha limar arboin gururachiti dershina that you owe me." So he didn't even say, "Give me that I'm entitled to." Rather, dershina, which the round hajj shall be sicha. He was making a joke. He didn't lend Rebbe any type of wheat, but that's what he said, and that was the joke. Rebbe laughed. I guess it was a funny sight. The guy comes in with a basket over his head, claiming that Rebbe owes him money. So there's a whole shiloh. Was he coming to collect his 40 gurur that he was entitled to, or why would you say he would be entitled to it if, in fact, he violated the terms of the agreement even before it started? So there's a whole shiloh why he said alone. Amalei, so Rebbe told him, Lavas harasach, did I not ask you, did I not warn you the loy siftachin? So he answered back, he doubled down. Amalei, chiti dershina kan sifta. No, I just want what you owe me. So he started making freilich there, even though Rebbe didn't want him to. And once again, why would you have this this back and forth, it's because Bar Kapara held that there would be a big telus for Klal Yisrael if, in fact, Rebbe would be happy. I forgot what I started off with when I introduced this story that was going to be relevant later, but I already forgot what I said a minute ago. There's a shaila of why it's 40. What's up is 40 greedy? Where did these numbers come from? So, if I'm not mistaken, I think the Ben Yoda says is that it says by Kabbalah Satira that the Torah comes with Yir Shemayim. The Torah brings Yir Shemayim, but I forgot the Lashon HaPasuk. I forgot the Lashon HaPasuk. I'm sorry? That's not the pasuk that I was referring to, but the Torah comes to Yerushalayim, and the Torah was received in 40 days and 40 nights. That's how long Moshe Rabbeinu was up by Har Sinai. So that's why I used the word 40 to refer to. What does it say? No, that's by Bakor's cheshbon. I'm talking about Rebbe's cheshbon. Rebbe's cheshbon is that the Torah was given with pachad, and therefore he offered him 40. Bar Kapara argued, Bar Kapara held for Garrett, you need simcha, that would bring it out better. I'm sorry? But the Torah's and that's how Rebbe held, that's how it should be. Okay, so Amalei, so another story that was mentioned is that the reason why Bar Kapara tried to get Rebbe Tlaf is Adarab. Rebbe had Yisurim, but if Rebbe would be Mekabel Yisurim Bahava, that would be the biggest cost for Klal Yisrael. So if Rebbe would laugh and enjoy, so it shows he's sort of trying to divert himself from his source. But the fact that Rebbe protested to even diverting his mind for a minute, distracting himself from his difficulties, that shows that Rebbe was mamish Mikabel, his Yisur Bahava, and that would have been a bigger shmear for Klal Yisrael. So Bar Kapara was just trying to demonstrate loud and clear that Rebbe was Kul L'Shem Shemayim. Amalei Bar Kapara Labar to the Rebbe. This is also a fascinating Gemara. Bar Kapara told the daughter of Rebbe, L'mocher tomorrow, Shasina Chamra, I'm going to drink wine, V'rikudidavach, and your father will be dancing, Uvekirkani the Imach, and your mother is going to be singing. Now this is half of the fellow. We're going to see in the story, in fact, Rebbe's wife did not sing. I mean, at least doesn't show that. But just the fact that he said this, there are certain things that we can't understand. There are certain things that the Tanoim were able to do that we can't even comment on. So, I mean, we know that the Tanoim would carry the kala on the shoulder sometimes, right? We wouldn't hear of such a thing. But we're not on their madrega. We can't even talk about these things and approach them. So what happened is Ben Elosha was the chasna de Rebbe Hava. He was the son-in-law of Rebbe, V'asher Gadol Hava, and he was a very, very rich man. Now, one of the problems we have to ask is if he's such a rich man, why isn't he called Moshe or Chaim, whatever his name was? Why do we only refer to him by his father's name? It almost seems like he never worked a day in his life, and he only had his money because he got it from his father. So that's something that we're going to discuss soon. Why he was called Ben Elosha. There are shittas who hold that he was a kohen. He was a very miyuchas. He was Nedarim by Rebbe, but he was a descendant of Rabbi Shmuel Ben Elisha, the kohen gadol. So Ben Elosha is like Ben Elisha. That's coming up. Azmane levehilula. So he was invited to the chasna, the Rebbe Shimon Rebbe. So what a shocker! Rebbe invited his first Edom to the wedding of his second daughter. He was invited. He was there. Amalei Bar Kapara Rebbe. So at this chasna, the Bar Kapara the Batkan showed up, and he asked as follows. It says Lagabe Mishkav Zocher Toyeva. Right? It says Ve'ish Asher Yishkav Zocher Mishkav Isha Toyeva also Shneim Moshe Masu Demeimba. What is the Toyeva? Called Amalei Rebbe, the Hachanu, every pshat that Rebbe tried to offer, the Hachanu Toyeva, Parcha Bar Kapara. Parcha Bar slugged up. So you see, Bar Kapara wasn't just a let's. He knew his business, right? So after Rebbe tried different pshatim and everything Bar Kapara slugged up, Amalei, so Rebbe said, Parshayat, so you tell me pshat. Amalei, you want me to say pshat? I don't say pshat for free. I charge. Teisi de vischi, bring your wife. Tirmeli notla, and she should pour for me a drink. Rashi's kli cotton, small drink, not and I'm sorry. Determining not also Ramile. So she did it. So the whole Shiloh, you're not allowed to be mishamish with an isha, especially someone else's wife. So there's a whole Shiloh how this worked. Could be she didn't give it directly to him. Could be she filled it up and put it on the table, and he took it later. Amalei the Rebbe, and then he said, "Kum rekoidli, you have to now dance for me." The emalach. So in order that I should tell you, pshat and toyeva. Hachi amar achmana. Toyeva means toya atava. You're straying to do this. And the Ran says, Shemaniach mishkebe isha v'hoylech etzel zacher. There's actually a story. The Reb Moshe doesn't get into this stuff, but Reb Moshe actually has a tshuva on Mishkav Zacher. And Reb Moshe writes to a boy who wanted to do tshuva because he had these problems. And Reb Moshe addresses this bacher not by name, because of course they wouldn't print the name in the English Moshe, but he addresses this guy as a tzaddik agadol, like Reb Moshe addresses him with beautiful titles, and he says that Mishkav Zohar is not even a natural taiva in the world. A person normally does not have that. Someone who's so engaged in his taivas, it creates new type of perverted taivas that aren't even normal, and that's what this means. Toyatava. You're straying from the path. It's not even natural. I can get thrown off of YouTube for saying this. I can get thrown out of Canada for saying this. But the Gemara says that it's not natural. It's not normal. It comes from someone who's so deep in Taiva that his great horror takes him to places that aren't even natural. Okay? Zok to Gemara weiter. So Toyataba lakasa achrina. You're toya to go to a different kois. A kosh that you shouldn't be interested in. Okay, Amalei my tevel. Then they asked him, what is tevel? Tevel is also used to describe a certain type of znus. It's referring to someone who is engaging with a behemoth. And it's going to be a shiloh here if we're talking about a woman being developed by a behemoth or a man being boiled a behemoth. Amalei, so he answered, Ki inyana kadma. So the same thing happened. Rebbe tried to offer pshatim, and Bar Kabar slugged it up, and then he said, "Okay, so tell me pshat." So Amalei, so Bar Kabar said, "Ividli, do what we discussed earlier. The same thing as before. Your wife has to serve me some wine, and then you have to dance. The Amalei, and then I'll tell you." Okay, Abad Amalei, Tavahu. What does that mean? Tavlin yeshba. Could be it's a lotion of bitmiya. Tavlin yeshba. Is there anything special about this? Mi shani hadavia min kulan biyos. Why do you need to go to a behemoth? What's wrong with human? What's wrong with picking on your own size, right? So the Ran learns Tavon Yeshba Bitmiya. Mashna hadavia min kulan biyos. Klemer heich maneches ben mina leilach etzel behema. So you see clearly the Ran is speaking about a woman who's being of elis behema ben mina. So that's what it's referring to. I believe the Mepharshim v'chitav yeshba Toimer yeshba bizu tam mibacheres shemaneches baila v'neveres lebehema. Is there something so special about a behema that she should leave humans and go to behemoths? So that's what tevel means. Okay, Amalei umay zima. Zima talks about, it says al tschal bitchel as noisa l'sizna aretz u'malart zima. So that's talking about znus between humans. So what does it mean? Amalei ivid. Do like we did last time. So they did the same thing. Zima stands for zu mahi. What is this? In other words, lashon sofik. Shein yidu mihi misaveres. Zima leads to a situation where a woman could be expecting and they don't know who the father is. Zu mahi. So that's what Zima stands for. Now, what's been going on for the last half hour is that Bar Kapara was speaking to Rebbe in a shtickle humiliating fashion. So Rebbe alone was able to handle it. But Ben Osha, who grew up as a Gvir, and he did a rich shidduch, he was such a knacker, he couldn't handle this disrespect that he was witnessing towards his father-in-law. So Lo Yochel Ben Elosha Le Mispal, he couldn't handle it. He got up. Benovik says, I'm going home here. Benovik who? Ben Tasim and he left. So that's the story. He got upset. He left at the wedding. I'm sorry? Him and his wife. He picked himself up with his wife and says, honey, we're going home. We're not standing here anymore. We're not staying for the mitzvah dance. We're Litvaks. We don't go for a mitzvah dance anymore. We're out of here. I assume this happened by a mitzvah dance. I can't do that in the middle of the wedding. But they tried. It had to be a mitzvah dance, right?
Why? The Rebbe was very, very well. Why do you want to have different one or one?
Because Bar Kapara insisted. Because Rabbi wanted pshat in the posuk. Because that wasn't the deal. But the Bar Kapara said, I'm only going to do it if your wife does it. I don't know. I told you over a story with the guy who made bets. Right? He tells the guy, I bet I'll be able to get your mother to sing and pour wine and your father to dance. So it was a dare. It was a dare. But I'll call upon him. It doesn't say anywhere that she sang, which is what he told the divorce.
Like when the started, so maybe scream.
That could be that. But yeah, but it could be that's what he meant. But at the end of the day, he never asked her to do that. He just asked her to bring a becher. It never says that he said she should sing. So Zakmar, my ben Elisha. What's ben Elisha? So what's up is the Gemara is asking my ben Elisha. So this is what the Gemara is asking. Why isn't he called by his own name? Why is he only called by his father's name? It's as if he never earned money. He just yarshened it all, right? So Zakmar the Tanya loy lechinam pizer ben Elisha smoisa. Ben Elisha spent a lot of money to teach himself how the special haircut of a kohen is, the kohen gadol is. Laharis behen taspirish shel kohen gadol. The chsiv kosam yichsemus r'shayim, and exactly how does this haircut work? Tana kein lulinus. It's like lulinus. So what is that? My lulinus amabido tisparta yechidasa. It's an individual. They sort of have to individually cut each strand of hair. Hechidami amarava rosh shozeh. It's an ikra shozeh. The hair, one hair would be at the base of the other hair, of the next follicle near it. So let's just look at the Lukutei Rashi, who says over here, he spent a lot of money. So the Mefarshim say only somebody who didn't earn the money and didn't work hard for the money, who yarshened the money, only a guy like that could spend so much money for something like this. And that's why they called him Ben Elisha, because only because he's a Ben Elisha and he didn't earn his own money, only such a guy would burn so much money for this. So what's shot in this unusual type of haircut? So there's actually a shaila what it means. Either it means that each hair only reached to the root of the hair near it, which means they were really cut short. But I saw somewhere else that every second row was cut very short. So every second row was cut a little longer, so it was able to bend over and touch the root of the next hair, and the next hair was cut very short. So could you imagine in the whole head, if every row of hair, every second row was cut short, and every not second row, it's a very difficult haircut to give. And that's what it was. And why does a Kohen Gadol have such a haircut? Because every time he thinks he's a big guy, he's a Kohen Gadol, he has to remember where he came from. He has to remember his roots, so he shouldn't chas v'sholom be misguided. How does he see his hair? He must have looked in the mirror. If not, everybody else sees it. He has to see it, right? Okay, so Dr. Gemara back there. We're already running late. Yeah, he had everything. Okay, uva the last haramucha. My the last haramucha. What is this? The last haramucha? Amashmul kara kurkuzoi. It's a squash that comes from this city. Rabashi Amar the last hatamuna beremitz. No, it just means that you buried it in hot coals to prepare it. Eisher Rabbeinu Rabashi, I'm going to prove to you that it's a place, and it's not just how it's prepared. Because Rabbi Nechemia Omer, the last Iram is who the last Amitris, and therefore it's Kalayim im Hayavanis, and it's Kalayim in Haramutza. If Ramutza is just a way it's prepared, it's not a type of the last, how can it be Kalayim? So to Yufta, you have a raya from here that in fact the last Haramutza is the last from a certain place. So we were discussing if that's included in the nether or not. Let me see. What? Let's go to the top show. Okay. So talk to more about it. Hanoider mimaisik there. What if someone says, I will not have ano for Maisa Gdera, ain't osir elami Maisa Rischosa, it's only osir for him to eat Maisa Rischosa, and we learned this from earlier because the Mishnah quotes the same Mishnah a little earlier, things that have to be heavily cooked in order for it to be able to be eaten. Ain't osir elami Maisa Gdera, el Maisa Rischosa. Amr Koyim Hayor Gdera, if he made an issue on himself from anything that gets put into a pot, Shanitoyim, then also b'chol nasa b'kteira, then anything that's cooked, he won't be able to eat. Tanya, hanoidim min hayored l'kteira, also b'yored l'ilfis. And the ilfis is a pan, and the Ran tells us they usually put it in kacho yedarkan b'ma'aseh ilfish. Show you marsicha nois b'kteira resicha kala. They would first cook it in the pot, and then they would put it into the ilfis, into the pan. So hanoidim min hayored l'kteira is up to Gemara. Also b'yored l'ilfis, it would be also for him even to eat something that gets put into an ilfis. But shikfayored there. Why? Because we just said before you put it into the ilfis, it goes into the there first, like the Ran explained. Kodim shiyored ilfis before it went into the ilfis. But if someone made a neder that it's also going to eat anything min hayored ilfis, then it's mutter biyored l'ktera. Then he is allowed to. Eat from something that went into ktera because it didn't necessarily go into an ilfis. Okay. And the Ran says, what's the chiddush? Kamashvan loytema kosher resicha oisa resicha kala. Kamoy sheyared leilfis yared leilfis mikri. Don't say that it's considered a yared leilfis even though it didn't go in. But they shumuchin lakach because now it's ready to go into the ilfis. Kamashvan, if it didn't actually go into the ilfis, it's not going to be osir. What if someone made a neder of anything that's mina nasa b'gdeira? Then nasa means it was completed in a pot. Mutter b'nasa b'ilfis. It's mutter for him to eat something that was completed in the pot, in the ilfis, because in fact, he's only answering something that's completed in the pot. For the same reason. Someone makes another, I won't have a no to eat anything that came out of an oven. So because a person normally, even though you could bake other things, but when people, the lashon of the adam is that when you say tanner, something tanner, you mean bread. Then also a lie. Then also then it will be also for him to eat anything that's made in an oven. If someone says, I'm not going to eat anything that is soaked. It's only referring to vegetables because normally when someone says ha kovish with the hair yediyah, he means dafka vegetables. What if he says, this is very important, this bach, because there's two pshatim and around on it. What if he says she'eni toyim? Also b'chalak fushim. Then it's also b'chalak fushim. And the Ran says there's a shaila exactly what is the word that he said that includes all the fushim. Is it because she'eni toyim he added those extra words, or is it because he said kovush she'eni toyim he didn't say ha kovush? If you say ha kovush the hayidiyah, you're referring to vegetables. If you just say kovush without the hayidiyah, then you're referring to everything. So once again, there's a shaila in the Ran. If the reasoning for this Mishnah is because you said kavush, or if the reasoning for this Mishnah is because you added the word shani toyim. The same thing is min hashalak, any aser, element hashalak shal basar, you only referring to meat. Shalak shani toyim, also b'chala shalukim. Amar Bachaber Ravavi Ravachi, Amar dikavush. He didn't say hakavush, he said dikavush. My. Or he said dishalak. My. Does it include everything or only meat or only vegetables? Ditzali, my, which is going to be the next Mishnah. Dimalich, my. So we don't know the lashon dir if that also means to only refer to that min that you would have meant if you said hakavush, or if it means anything.
Translation of the high.
Minatzli ein asher lo minatzli shal basar divrei Rabbi Yehuda tzli shani toyim also b'chalat tzlim anything that's roasted. Min hameliach ein asher ela min hameliach shal dag meliach shani toyim also b'chalat v'lichem anything that's salted. Dag dogim. So we use two dag and dogim. Shani toyim then asher bahen bein gedolim bein ketanim bein meluchim bein tfeilim bein chayim sayra bein milushalim. So they must have had sushi in those days as well, because it was chaim, maybe Mushalim. Well, herring is kavush. So this is mamashra, that's sushi. Umuter v'trias terufa. But they're allowed to eat trias terufa, which is chopped up fish. Chopped up fish is not included in dag dogim, because dag dogim is referring to whole fish. Dag would be referring to a larger fish, and dogim would be referring to smaller fish. I'm sorry? Yeah. Uvetzir, uvemurais, and it would also be mutter for the tzir and murais, which is just the fat and the juice that comes out of the fish. Hanoidim in a tzachana. Tzachana, the Ran says, is tzachana's dogim ketanim harbe maluchim, a whole bunch of small fish that are salted. The yesh mehen trufan el sharuvim shleim. Most of them are complete fish, but there are some chopped up pieces. The katani and the mission tells us the chilin sheyesh mehen trufin, since some of them are chopped up, aser b'trias trufa. Now it'll be aser b'trias because this doesn't include sachna, doesn't include chopped up, but umiu b'tzir b'murais mutter that would not be included in sachna. So the only sachna even includes small chopped pieces, but not the juice or the fat. So aser b'trias trufa mutter b'tzir b'murais. I know the b'trias trufa aser b'tzir b'murais. This aser is changed. It's actually mutter. I know the b'trias trufa mutter b'tzir b'murais because once again you're only asering the fish itself, even though it's chopped off, but not any juice that comes out of it. Zok the Gemara right here. Tanya Rab Shimon ben Elazar Eimer. Dag shani toyim. If he says dag shani toyim, only dag aser b'gdoilim or mutter b'ktanim, because dag has a connotation of a large fish. Daga shani toyim aser b'ktanim or mutter b'gdoilim. What if we say dag and daga shani toyim? Then it's aser ben gdoilim ben b'ktanim, which is just clarifying what we learned in the Mishnah. Amar Papa Abaye. Mimai the dog shani toyim gadalu. How do you know that when you say dog, you mean a big fish? Maybe you mean a small fish. That must have been a pretty big fish if it was able to swallow up yoina. But you find daga could also be a pretty big fish. Right, that was the second fish. If it held yoina, it can't be too small. Maybe that daga is dilma polti da godo uboli da koton, and compared to the first fish, the second fish was smaller, but not that daga really means smaller. Ella, what about by Mitzrayim? It says "Va'daga asher b'yor mesa." Are you going to suggest that kitani mesu gedolim loy mesu? Are you going to suggest that? Ella, it must be daga mashma gedolim umashma ktanim. Nedarim halach achaloshim b'nei adam. You can't bring me right from Pesukim. Loshim b'nei adam means when someone says daga, he means small fish. Hanur b'netzachana. Amar Ravina Rabashi. Amar harei alai tzichin. What if it harei? So he didn't say tzachana loshon yochid. But Sichin Lashon Rabim, would that also include the Murais and the other stuff? Like Gemara Tiboi. Let's see the Rab. Amar Le Sichin, Mi Mitzur B'Tzir Umurais Eloi. Would that also include Tzir Umurais? The Mishum Hachim Mikri Dog and Katanim, Kavushim Tzachna. Why are small soaked fish called Tzachna? Mipnei Shatzir Hayotzamin Reiche Noide. Meloshem Atal Tzachanosai. I guess it smells. It has a strong smell to it. You walk into someone's basement who makes herring, ask David Leib and he'll tell you. You walk into someone's house who makes herring, you know that he makes herring there. When we boiled the Shiloh was, he Amr Tzichin, which is Lashon Rabim, the Masha Ribuya, Imishtama Bein Nami Tzir Umurai Sherloi. Does it also include Tzir Umurais or not? And the Gemara ends up with a Teku. Tiboy is Nedarim language for Teku. Nedarim, the Gemara uses different types of words to say the same thing that we're used to seeing in other Masechtas. What's that? At the beginning of the Masechta, on the first daf, yeah. Okay, Shkoyach.
By Yoin, it's quite a male fish.
Right.